Right, let me pull down the screen so I can start off by talking to people. And how do I do that? Right, welcome everybody to our first web event of 2021. It is absolutely exciting to see everyone online. I am talking to you from, as I just mentioned, the paradise of Johannesburg in South Africa. I know a lot of people are joining us from all over the place. Today I'm joined by our associates. I'm joined by Peter Jordan and Stefaan van den Heever. Peter has been working with this framework for, Peter, I think it's a quarter of a century now. You were introduced to this framework in the mid-90s, which means that you've been working with the framework for, what, almost half your life, I would say. Roughly speaking. Peter's experience has been in explosives manufacturing, so literally standards have been a life or death issue in Peter's world, and taking ownership of things has been a life and death issue in Peter's career. So Peter, you are eminently qualified to have this conversation with us, and thank you for joining us. We are also joined by Stefaan van den Heever. Stefaan did not start his career in explosives manufacturing. He started his career as a professional golfer in the US. Stefaan, after playing enough rounds of golf, decided that he would get out of playing professional golf and into coaching, and spent a number of years helping golfers to take ownership of their swing, I suppose. And ultimately transitioned. He saw the parallels between professional sports and business, and it must be about 15 years ago, Stefaan transitioned into initially a business coaching role, and then when Stefaan started working with us, the reason for doing that, and Stefaan, please correct me if I'm wrong here, was that you just saw the enormous potential in shifting the system at the same time as shifting the individuals. So one of the things that Stefaan has spoken to me about over time has been, if you can enable a shift in individuals, but if the system doesn't change, if the organization doesn't transform, what happens over time is the individuals tend to go back to how they used to be. Yeah. And so Stefaan has been working with this framework and with us on this organization, what we call organization transformation, to shift the organization, as it were, from a place where people are taking to a place where people are giving.
Yeah.
Right, so welcome Stefaan, welcome Peter.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone.
Today's event is a little bit different from the events that we've done in the past, and the reason it is different is that in the past we have focused on the leader. We focused on what you can do, how you can respond in a crisis, how you can work with other leaders, how you can take ownership and these types of things. Today, we are shifting the focus, not from what you can do for yourself, but how you can go about enabling some of this shift in your teams. Right, we are starting from the assumption that you are on top of your game. And when I say on top of your game, what I mean is that you as the leader have managed to make a transition from taking to giving. You as a leader have managed to focus more on what you can do to support your teams, to support the customer, than worry about what you are getting out of your leadership role. Because there is one thing that is absolutely true, and that is you are going to struggle, you're always going to struggle to enable your teams to contribute if you are not able to contribute in a meaningful way yourself. So that is the starting point. We are assuming, if you like, a certain degree of leadership excellence within the leader before you start working on your team. But on the assumption that everyone on the call has reached that level, I think that today you will hopefully find to be an interesting discussion. I invite you to please talk to us, to use the chat, to ask questions, to interact with us. It's not often that we have Peter on the line with so much experience, and Stefaan with his experience from different contexts. So I really encourage you to ask questions and challenge us. The format that we're going to use to have this conversation is I'm going to put a situation on the table. I am then going to ask Peter to describe what he sees in that situation, and then I'm going to ask Stefan to please describe how he believes that situation can be dealt with. As in, if you are a manager dealing with a similar situation, how should you go about dealing with that? Again, we would love to hear from anyone who has dealt with similar situations or anyone who is currently dealing with challenges, or maybe something which is slightly different, but you'd like some thoughts and advice from everyone on. Right, so that is where we are going today, and I hope that you enjoy it. We're certainly going to have some fun. Right, starting with the first situation. Peter and Stefan, anything from your side before we get going?
All good, Ian. Thank you.
All good.
Okay, great. Right, situation one, and this is actually a situation which comes straight from my own career and is somewhat autobiographical. Somewhat. Imagine you're a manager. There is a member of your team. This person is a graduate in their first year of work. They're a solid and enthusiastic performer, and they're doing well in their new role. Okay. One night over drinks, this person discovers that he is in fact earning less than his peers, performing a similar role. He doesn't know why he's earning less than his peers or why they're earning more than him, but he immediately makes some assumptions as to why this is the case, and very rapidly concludes that the organization and management in particular is unfair. Right? He's in fact so upset by this 5% discrepancy in salaries that he's no longer able to find the motivation to do his job well. He's seriously considering finding another job. Right, this is autobiographical, as I mentioned, but it's also something we come across all the time. Somebody has suddenly decided, they were perfectly happy yesterday, and they suddenly decided that, in fact, the organization is unfair today. Right. Peter, what are we seeing in that situation? How would you analyze that? How would you break that down?
Ian, we see a change taking place because initially, before the drinks and the discovery of the discrepancy in pay, the person was a net contributor. Okay, so whether they conceptualized that or not, the reality was that they were giving of themselves and they weren't withholding. So they were a net contributor to the organization. After the discovery that I'm earning a tad less than somebody else, you see a change happen. You see a withdrawal of willingness due to a sense of grievance. Now, the problem with that is that once one withdraws one commitment or limits one commitment due to a perceived grievance, one is actually falling into the victimhood state of mind. In other words, the external world has treated me unfairly, in this instance by paying me somewhat less than my peers, and this is impacting on myself to the extent that I have a grudge and I'm withdrawing my willingness, and it's all about the outside, it's not about me. So this person has moved into very dangerous territory early in his career because it happened relatively soon, but absolutely without doubt, as his career progressed, he will come across and would have come across other issues of unfairness or perceived unfairness. And if by this early stage of your life you've moved into that victimhood hole, it doesn't speak well for going forward. So the issue here is not so much about the pay, it's about the person's mental framework and in terms of engaging. And between he and all with his management, for his own growth and maturity, needs to get out of that mode as soon as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter, for unpacking my my personal psychological issues from 30 years ago. Stefan, what can you do about it? I mean, if this person is on your team, and a lot of managers who've asked me this question have concluded what I need to do about it is pay them more.
Yeah.
I need to go up against the system and I need to complain to management about this unfairness. And what I do is I jump on their side. But that's not our, that's not always our view. So, how would you deal with the situation? What would you advise?
Yeah, Ian. So, I mean, certainly that is one option for the manager to speak up. Especially if it's in the interest of fairness. That's one option. We do believe, however, that there is a bigger leadership opportunity here. Legitimate leaders, they use the task to enable the person, to make the person grow. And that's exactly what I would propose here, is that the manager use the situation or this challenge to help the employee mature, to help them grow. Look, I think it's good for you to help your people, but it's not good to create dependency. I think a product of good leadership is to create people that are strong, people that are mature, independent, that take responsibility and accountability. So that's what that's what I would propose here. So practically, what can the manager do? Well, they can absolutely help this employee to look at the bigger picture of their career and to get perspective. In 20 years' time, a 5% discrepancy, is it really the end of the world right now? And is it really worth letting your motivational levels drop? So I think that's one thing. I think the manager can challenge this person not to have a victim mindset because of a certain situation, but rather for them to keep raising their own standards despite the situation. I think the manager can help this person mature by focusing on what they can control, because isn't that what strong people do? Strong people focus on what they can control, and they focus on their impact on the world and not the world's impact on them. So I think that's, those are some practical things the manager can do. And if we can maybe go to the next slide, I think in essence, these are the shifts that the manager can help this person with to really help them move their focus from their gripes to formulating new goals. And it's really the shift from a victim mindset to a mastery mindset. And this shift can take place in 3 different areas: attention, intention, and accountability. So with attention, it's really to shift your attention from something that happened in the past or the present for that matter, and where you are stuck, to starting to focus on the future, formulating new goals to step into the future. Shifting your intention from taking to giving. So in other words, asking, what can I do about this? What is my contribution to this situation? What is in my control here, and what can I take accountability for? And then also accountability. I think often when employees or people start going into this victim mindset, they tend to become immobilized, and they tend to stay with what is known and secure, and therefore not be accountable. And I think the shift that this manager can help them is to step into the unknown, is to embrace risk, and really to take accountability for the situation they're in. When we do this application module in the Grow to Care process, this is a process that we take employees through. When we call it the Gripe to Goal process. So that's what I would propose here. I think in essence, what the manager can do here is to help this person really restore their sense of accountability for the situation they're in. I think that's the give that the manager can do here.
Yeah. Stefan, a challenge to that. All very well in theory, but does it actually make a difference in practice? I mean, when you go to somebody and you say, look, there's a bigger picture out there, don't worry about it, the world is unfair. In essence, shit happens. Do people actually respond positively to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the what the manager needs to do is to really help this person see what's happening to them as a result of their attitude in the situation. So it's not, it's not so much just telling people to suck it up, but it's really helping people to understand what is happening to me in the situation, and how can I find my strength within the situation. Because obviously in life, whether it's at work or in your personal life, there will be things that happen that is not fair. But then the question is, how are you going to respond to it? Are you going to become weak in it, or are you actually going to take accountability for it? And I think that's the point here. The point is for them to change their attitude, to change how they respond to the situation.
Right. Yeah, I think that the construct of using a challenge to enable growth is a really powerful idea, as opposed to seeing every challenge as something that you as the leader need to fight against and rail against and overcome. And I've seen managers go to war with senior management over a junior person's salary. And I just said to them, you're missing the opportunity to help the junior person stand on their own 2 feet and rise above what is essentially a meaningless discrepancy in salary. Mm-hmm. Peter, any last thoughts from your side? And then I'm going to go to the chat. In fact, maybe Peter, let's go to the chat. John has said, this implies a high degree of trust in the manager. Would you agree with that?
Yes, trust is essential. So in the absence of that, very little coaching, in this case, coaching takes the form of the gripe to goal. In the absence of that trust, it is going to have a severely negative impact on the effectiveness of the coaching. Because trust is the basis upon which leadership is built. So I'd absolutely agree with that. But it isn't a line between absolute no trust and absolute trust. So an opportunity like this, in getting the person to take this into perspective and grow by it, will in itself be a trust-enhancing process. So wherever one is on the trust continuum, to enter into something like this and enable the employee to take ownership will ultimately contribute to building trust.
Yeah. Agreed. How do you do this? And maybe I'll flip back to you, Stefan. How do you do this without seeming uncaring?
Yeah, so I think, Ian, I think the leader is really being put to the test basically every day in terms of what their intent is towards the employee. And I do think the leader has to overcome or win this, what we call intent test. So in other words, over time, really communicate or show that they have the employee's best interest at heart. And when the employee realizes that, listen, my manager actually cares about me, my manager has my best interest at heart, and therefore, when they are being tough on me, I will actually accept it. Why? Because I know that they've got my back. It's the same as a good parent. A good parent is not just nice to their kids all the time. They sometimes are also tough on their kids. And that also forms, the basis of trust. Yeah. So I think for me it's that. I think it's the manager showing and building trust over time by really taking the interests of the employee at heart.
Yeah. I think if I can add to that, Ursula, I started this conversation by saying we're assuming a certain level of give on the part of the manager. And by the time you have this conversation, you do need to have a relationship which is strong enough that the person understands your sincerity.
Yeah.
if this is the first conversation, if this is the first sincere, deep conversation that you ever have with somebody, and it's about how they should accept that life is unfair, you're going to struggle to come across as anything but self-serving and uncaring, right? But if you've built a relationship with somebody where they're actually willing to listen to you and they see that your perspective has value, and that you are actually in support of them, then I don't think that you do come across as uncaring. Because you're not denying the situation, you're simply saying, let me help you to rise above it. Yeah. Don't let the situation own you. Incidentally, there's nothing to stop you simultaneously from actually trying to solve the problem. There's nothing to stop you simultaneously going to HR and saying, listen, there is actually a discrepancy here. But don't make that your primary focus, because that's not the big opportunity. Yeah. Right. Are there any thoughts or any questions that anyone would like to raise before we move on to the second situation? And we will distribute these slides afterwards, if you would like to get hold of them. Right, Peter, please pay attention. Next situation is also complicated. Although I think one can draw it down to quite to some basics. This is something that happened not to me as an individual, but when I was in a management role. Right, I went through this this happened probably close to 15 years, between 10 and 15 years ago. I had overall responsibility for a fairly significant program of work at one of South Africa's large banks. I was really excited about this program because I felt it was really meaningful. It was about implementing legislation which was going to be groundbreaking. It was going to help to shift our very uneven debt landscape, and I was really excited that we had been selected to get involved with this. So I went to this bank on a given day. I gathered the team together. There were about 15 people, and I wanted to find out what was going on and how we could help the team to deliver on the promises that we'd made to the bank. So I literally asked the question, how are things going? How can I help? And what happened next did actually surprise me, I'm embarrassed to say. I was confronted with various complaints, from the quality of the coffee in this place is not good enough, to my parking space is too far away, to it's a longer drive to work here, to did you know that people at the bank have better laptops than us? And I was a little bit shattered. I couldn't believe it. There wasn't a single question about the program's impact or a request for support in influencing anybody. And I have to admit, I lost my temper. I did. I lost my cool, and because I thought, this is so small-minded. This program was so important, and all I got was whinging. Right? Two questions. One, I'll tell you what I actually did afterwards, but I know that I got it wrong. But here's the question. What had gone wrong here? And I'll give you a clue as to my view. I don't think it's because they were millennials, which was what a number of people concluded. This is just because they're millennials. Millennials are like that. But I don't think that was it. Peter, what are you seeing in that scenario?
Ian, yes. All too prevalent one, really, out there. And sad and disenabling scenario. As irritating as the gripes that the people expressed. And I must say, if I was in your shoes, I probably would have lost it as well. But having said that, it's actually not so much about the gripes. That's the core or the concern here. It's that the people missed the point. They've missed the point of the benevolent intent, the adding of positive value to the world out there and their contribution to it, that they're not mindful of. It's possible that intellectually they understood it, but it's not translating, it's not coming through. They're not seeing joining the dots between what they are doing and the benevolent intent of, in this case, contributing significantly towards the stability of the economy of the country. They're not seeing it. And that's the sad bit. The gripes are just a symptom. They aren't the root cause of it. So Stefan will get on to what the manager needs to do, so I'm going to touch on that. But through their own effort and or with the inputs of the manager, they have to be able to know and secondly, deeply understand what it is. Because, you know, so often as management, we tell people what to do. We don't necessarily elaborate sufficiently on the why. And even if we do, that may not be sufficiently internalized by people. So once again, it's a two-way street. If you don't understand the real benevolent intent, ask. But you have to get there. Or you're really missing the point on the road to joining the 50% plus of employees who are really disengaged from the true meaning of what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Stefan?
Yeah, I think Peter really explained it well. I believe from my side, the three shifts we spoke about in scenario one and the gripe to goal process is definitely also applicable here, definitely. And then, as Peter said, I think there's a bigger issue here, a bigger point here, and if you're a manager and you find yourself in this position, I would say it's to help people and maybe to challenge them to connect with the purpose of the project and to really understand the impact on the customer or the client, and really for people to find their purpose then within the project or the organization. So it's really about helping people or challenging them on finding their why. Yeah, I mean, here you have a case of people having the opportunity to be part of historic legislation and to impact the lives of millions of South Africans, and helping them and protecting them from being over indebted. And you are instead focusing on coffee and limited parking spaces. I mean, seriously. So I think the manager can help them really connect to the bigger purpose, of the project. So yeah, if we can go to the next slide, then these are the types of questions you can ask people to really connect with the why or the purpose. And I think the first one is so important. Why does your organization exist? And I think this question is important for all of us on this call that are part of an organization. We need to know this. And if you don't know the purpose of your organization, I do believe you have a serious problem, because if you don't know it, how on earth will your people know it, and how will the customer experience it? And I think if you think that the purpose of your organization is to make money, then sadly you are missing the point. So I think you need to be able to answer, and you need to help your people answer the question: what is what we do for our customers or clients? What is our value add? How are we making the lives of people better? So I think that's the first point. I think, just very important point. I think if you're the manager, if you're in a situation like this, you can challenge your people with the second question: what is the value add of your function or our function, our department? I think that is important. People, employees, they need to know the flow of the business. They need to know how all the pieces of the organization fit together to form, the whole, and how all the pieces of the puzzle come together to serve the customer. I think employees need to know and understand the core functions versus the support functions. There's no use for a support function to think and act like they are a core function. Then the organization starts working against itself. It's important for people not to become siloed, because again, then politics start to thrive, the organization start to work against itself. So, so employees really need to understand the flow of the business and how that works. And then finally, the third question, very important. Now it's for the individual. Do they understand their role and how that contributes to the purpose of the organization? And again, it's not so much what they do, but it's about why they do it. And it's about what does what they do for the customer, whether that customer is internal or external, and that having that line of sight. So yeah, I think these three questions can really help people and can help managers. So if I can just think of an example, if you take, for example, a financial broker selling insurance and financial products, if you ask that person, what is your role? They probably, most of them will say, well, my role is to sell these insurance products, these financial products. So, I mean, I think that's just one part of it. I think the other part that they need to get and connect to is actually, what contribution are they making here? And from that perspective, it might be that, why am I here? Well, I'm here to really help my clients understand these financial products. I'm here to really explain these financial products so my clients can make informed decisions. I'm really here to restore the faith in the financial services industry. I think those reasons are a lot more worthwhile getting up in the morning for. And I think that really can inspire people to serve customers excellently. I think often, if you ask sales managers, for example, what are you here to do? They might say, well, I'm here to generate sales. And again, I think the point is being missed. They are in fact there to enable their people to serve customers excellently. That is that's actually, the value add. So, I mean, I think for the manager needs to understand that there is no such thing as a menial or unimportant job, but it is about helping people to connect to the purpose and to attach meaning to what they do, and to really help your people to see their roles and the value that they add in a new way, so they can find purpose and they can find their why. Yeah, that's from my side. Thank you.
Yeah. Stefan, Peter, I'll get to you with the next question, but what happens if the organization doesn't actually know the purpose beyond making a profit?
Yeah, Ian, as I said, I think that's a big problem, because then, how can people pull in the same direction, and how can your customers and clients really experience you, in a certain way? So I think that is where strong leadership is needed, to give people a vision, to give people something exciting to get up in the morning for. So yeah, so I do think, I mean, obviously there will be people in an organization that doesn't have a purpose. There will be people that does this. There will be people that are clear on their own internal purposes. But I just think it becomes fragmented. Yeah, that would be my view.
Yeah. Thanks, Stefan. Peter?
Yes, yeah.
Profit should be expressed as an output rather than a purpose. Agree or disagree?
Agree. I see it as being congruent with focusing on what you can give rather than being overly obsessed with what you're going to get out of it. So I think one of the fundamental tenets of where we come from in a legitimate leadership is to ensure that your inputs are excellent, on the basis that ought to lead to excellent results. So if one is, I mean, obviously profit is important. Organizations would not exist without a surplus. So let's be clear about that. But if you fixate on the bottom line without giving 90 or 80 to 90% of your time as to what you need to do and how you need to enable people to get there, you know, then I'm afraid you're jeopardizing the very God you're worshiping being the bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just reading a comment from Simon. We talk about strategy, goals, and values. What difference we can make to society? Profit follows if we get this right. I think, you know, Simon has a very valid point. And it's also worth pointing out that we work with lots of types of organizations, and profit is not always the only motivator. You know, you do get not-for-profit organizations which see their role differently. But even in not-for-profit organizations, you get people who don't connect with the purpose, who have the job because it's the job. So don't make the assumption that because, I mean, it was one of the things that really surprised me when I first did work for a not-for-profit, was I had imagined that this organization must be filled with good people who are here because they care about the children. And what I was confronted with was a number of people who literally only cared about having a job and getting their salary. And challenging people to see the bigger picture was a really important function of management. Yeah, so thank you for that. We have one more scenario to go through, and let me pull my screen down before I do that. We're going to flip it around. Peter, your scenario, I will try to explain it, and then Stefan, what do you do about it? Just for a little bit of difference.
Right. So, Ian, you listen up this time. The scenario goes back approximately 40 years. So, you know, clearly I could have had nothing to do with it. It's about a young teacher who takes up his first teaching post. He's enthusiastic. Perhaps a little bit naive about how much he doesn't know, but not untypical for a graduate in his first time. Where he works at the school, there's absolutely no performance management system whatsoever, and no formal system for giving employees performance feedback. The line of command is loosely defined. In essence, the head is worshipped and everybody else is sort of an amorphous mass underneath that, regardless of seniority. Insofar as one-on-one conversations happen, they may be about personal issues, because it was a reasonably caring environment, or day-to-day issues. So there was nothing really beyond that. From time to time, this teacher, experienced the odd compliment. He received virtually no negative feedback whatsoever, but that wasn't congruent with the vibe that he felt he was getting. So there was a silent feeling of they're not entirely satisfied with, but it was never verbalized. So after a year or two, this teacher began to notice that people had started more or less the same time as him, seemed to be being given more recognition, perhaps allocated more responsibilities than was the case with him. And what did he do? He thought, aha, favoritism. That's what it is, nothing but favoritism. So his enthusiasm declined, became perhaps a tad less conscientious, and certainly began to scrutinize the government gazette for other teaching posts. At no time whatsoever did he approach any of his seniors in the hierarchy to perhaps confront them, to say, look, this is my perception, tell me if I'm wrong, and or to explore improvement opportunities. And yeah, he did leave the organization not too long after that.
And Peter, how does this friend of yours feel about it 40 years later?
Oh, that old guy. No, he seems to have grown out of it.
Good. I mean, let me unpack that situation a little bit as I understand it, and you can obviously correct me if you think I've got it wrong, Peter. But I'm seeing three things. The first is that I'm seeing somebody who is failing to take ownership of their contribution, in the sense of not of that they're doing a bad job teaching or they don't know what teaching is all about, but when you don't get feedback, how do you know how to improve? How do you know how to get better? How do you understand what you can do differently? And it's really hard to take ownership when you're not getting that kind of really any feedback around how you're doing in your core job. So that's the one thing for me. The second thing, which is problematic, is that this individual is making assumptions, and assumptions are always dangerous. Making assumptions about why he's not getting feedback, making assumptions about favoritism, making assumptions about his colleagues, and that is a challenging situation to be in. And then thirdly, I see somebody who has a very narrow view of their own job. My job is to teach, right? My job isn't to raise my concerns. My job isn't to challenge the system where I think the system's getting it wrong. My job is to just teach, and everything else should just fall into place around me. Otherwise, I'm a victim. So that's how I would summarize it. Three things. You can't take ownership if you're not getting feedback. You're starting to make assumptions, and then thirdly, you are seeing your job in a very narrow light, and providing feedback up the line isn't part of your job. Stefan, what do you do about it? If your organization is characterized by Friends of Peter's, what happens?
Yeah, and I think you said it well. And clearly and obviously the senior of this teacher should ideally be empowering the teacher. Clearly, ideally they should be giving them the means to do the job. They should make sure they've got the ability, and ideally they should hold them accountable. Ideally they should clarify expectations with them, give them feedback, sit in on one of their teaching classes every now and again and give them feedback on that. Obviously this is not happening, and I think the problem is that this teacher is doing nothing about it, and they're just waiting. And I do think over time, a victim mindset can set in. So if I'm the manager, I would definitely challenge this teacher. I would challenge them to, if they don't have the means to do the job, well, then speak up and ask for the means. If they're not happy about the environment, then again, speak up, talk to me, challenge me, ask me. So I do think it's about challenging this person's assumptions. And it's about really reframing for them what their contribution is. As you said, your job is not just to teach. There's a lot of other contributions that you can make here. You are in a team, you are in the system, and again, take ownership for your career. Take ownership for the situation. Speak up, and if we can go to the next slide. I really think it is about enabling accountability. So this teacher really needs to take accountability for the situation they're in. And maybe these questions can help the manager to help the teacher. So what is the mindset here? Are you being a victim, a victim here, or is there evidence of a mastery mindset? Can you start focusing forward? What can you do about the situation? And how are you feeling? And your assumptions, can you start to speak up? What can you control here? What contribution can you start making to change the situation that you're in? Going to another school is not the answer, because the same situation can just repeat itself unless you start to change. And again, what will taking accountability look like in the situation? So that's the one thing I think the manager can help the teacher to enable courage. So what are the risks for the individual in addressing the situation directly? And very importantly, what are the implications of doing nothing other than blaming? That is a key question. And again, then what is the first step? So I think it's really about the manager or the senior of the teacher challenging them to take ownership of their career and not waiting, because they're probably going to wait forever. They need to take ownership. Yeah. So, and Ian, I mean, I think for me, I reflect a lot, on this thing of employee excellence and employees taking ownership. And I think the examples I see a lot, and and I see this even when I go walk around in a mall, and in my experiences with employees, salespeople, etc., is I think employees often they think that they make a value-added contribution, but actually they're just doing activities. So I think for me, there's a big difference when it comes to ownership between, just doing activities on the one side and really making a value-added contribution on the other side. And if I can really just share the story, just a quick story. Last year, I was doing a workshop at a financial services companies, and the asset manager, they invest people's money. I'm also a client of this company, and I was doing a workshop, and I wanted to phone the Rosebank office to set up the room in a certain way for the next day's workshop. And unfortunately, I couldn't find the number for this Rosebank branch. So being a client, I just phoned the client number. Lady answered the phone, and I said to her, listen, I've got the wrong number. I'm doing a workshop in your Rosebank office. The room needs to be set up in a certain way, but I don't have your number. Can you please give me the number for the Rosebank office? And what the consultant said really surprised me. She said to me, sir, why don't I just do this for you? Why don't I just phone the Rosebank office and I will get them to set up the room in a certain way? I was quite surprised, and I thanked her, and I described to her how the room should look, etc. And that was the call. 20 minutes later, I received an email, and the email was the following. This lady said, Mr. Van Heever, the room has been set up in the way you want to. The room will be set up in the way you want this. And so from reception will welcome you at such and such a time. Good luck with your workshop tomorrow, and thank you for the contribution you're making to our company. And I was just like, wow, isn't this amazing? There's so many things this person could have done. She could have just said to me, sir, it's not in my job description. That's the one thing she could have done. She could have said to me, sir, here is the Rosebank office's number. And that's the end of the call. But instead, she absolutely went above and beyond. And that's for me, it was such a good example of an employee really taking ownership of their contribution and going above and beyond. And the point here is that even if the funds of this company doesn't perform, I will probably, if I keep getting experiences like this, I will stay with them for life. And I think that's the point here. And hopefully that clarifies why this is so important, why this teacher really needs to understand their ownership and the accountability they need to take in this situation. Yeah.
Yeah, Stefan, obviously you'll put the name of that institution, down so some of us can benefit from your experience. No, I mean, it is amazing how some people will go above and beyond, and our job as leaders is to try to enable that for people. Thank you. Peter, I'm going to ask if you have any other comments. I did say to you before the call, I'm fascinated to hear what advice Stefan would have given you as a young teacher. And how would you have responded to that advice is the one question. And then I would like to, there is a question which was sent to me privately about scenario 1, and I'd love to just respond to that at the end and respond to any other questions if there is time in the next 7 or so minutes. But Peter, firstly, how would you respond if Stefan had come to you with?
Ian, clearly you've blown my cover, so I have to own up to being the person involved. I think it is a great pity that I wasn't confronted. Clearly, I'd moved into a victimhood mindset. And, that was my doing because there were alternatives. The alternatives were to have spoken about it, confronted others. I have reason to believe that my seniors knew where the situation I was in. They too chose not to confront it. Maybe with the hope that I would delve into that government gazette and go. And if that was the case, they got their wish. But that certainly isn't a leadership role to follow. The role of the leader is to confront victimhood and for the growth of the people to get them out of it. Not just say, well, that guy's, his enthusiasm declined. Sooner he goes, the better, without even trying. So, once again, it's definitely a two-way street.
Yeah, Peter, thank you.
Right,
Yeah. No, and I think that this, that type of scenario you're talking about a teaching or a school environment, but it's pervasive. It happens all the time. And how can you enable people? And I think the last point is, this isn't just about what you can do for your teams. It's about what you can do for people in your organization more broadly. It's how you can enable people in the organization with these types of questions. The questions that Stefan put up with these kinds of attitudes. Because obviously it's not your team that doesn't understand the purpose, because clearly you've told your purpose, and discussed it with your team. And it's not your team who are acting like victims, because you wouldn't tolerate victimhood in your team. But it might be other people's teams. I want to come back to a question just in the last 2 minutes, but the question was, in scenario 1, if you're playing the long game, salary increment or this 5% difference might be something quite meaningless, and that is absolutely true. But what if it wasn't salary increment? What if it was a core personal value was getting violated, or promises were being broken, or there was a gender bias, or there was a race bias, and this was crossing the line in terms of unfairness? Would you give the person the same advice to kind of rise above it and not let it impact them? And the short answer to that question is the advice that I would certainly give people is, if this is a violation which you are not willing to live with, then don't live with it. Right? If you believe that you're working in an organization which is systematically racist or systematically gender biased, why are you working there? That would be, that would be the advice. And working against those systems is, in fact, an important piece of the puzzle. But it is not. It's not distinct from still doing a good job.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? You can, in fact, do a good job and also confront the system at the same time. It's not one or the other. It's when you start confronting the system at the expense of doing your job that you struggle. The shop steward you listen to is one who's also doing a fantastic job with people, not the one who always has a complaint and the only thing they ever do is complain to you. Right? So that's, I think, what I would say. is no, don't accept unfair systems. Don't accept things, especially where values are being trodden or where there's systematic racism, etc. Of course, you must go against those things. But keep things in perspective. If it is simply a 5% discrepancy in salary, that is not the same as a systematically racist organization. It's not the same, and some people fight this. Some people fight with the same gusto in both of those situations. Right. Thank you very much, everybody. I am just reading the last couple of comments, and I absolutely agree with those. I hope that you found this to be a useful session. Please get in touch with us if you do have any thoughts or any comments that you'd like to share with people or that you'd like to share with us. I hope to see you again on one of these sessions, and have a fantastic Thursday, what remains of it, in various places in the world. Much appreciated. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank
And
you.
goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you, Stefan, and thank you, Peter, especially.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.